This is today's number 3 most urgent vulnerability on the Daily Ranked CVE Brief, where we focus on what to patch first, ranked by real exploitation signal, CISA KEV, first EPSS, and CVSS. CVE 2026-68820 is not a remote break-in bug. It is a local privilege escalation issue in Microsoft Windows 10 1607. That distinction matters, but it should not make defenders relax. Local privilege escalation is often the second move, after a foothold, after stolen credentials, after a user-level compromise. CISA lists this CVE as known exploited. So the key question is not whether it looks dramatic on paper. The key question is whether exposed Windows 10 1607 systems can be brought under patch control quickly. The official NVD description is short and important. Use after free in Windows Ancillary Function Driver for WinSock allows an authorized attacker to elevate privileges locally. In plain English, this is a memory lifetime bug in a Windows component tied to WinSock functionality. The weakness category is CWE 416, use after free. That means software frees a chunk of memory, but later continues to use a reference to it as if it were still valid. In low-level system code, that can become dangerous because memory may be reused in unexpected ways. If an attacker can influence that state, the program may behave outside its intended security boundaries. Here, the stated security result is local elevation of privilege by an authorized attacker. Verdict: 7.0. High is serious because the impact is high, even though the attack is local and higher complexity. The two CVSS details to focus on are this: the attack vector is local, and the impact to confidentiality, integrity, and availability is high. Local means an attacker needs some level of access to the machine already. This is not described as a drive-by network exploit. High complexity means exploitation is not expected to be trivial or universally reliable. But the impact side is the reason it ranks here. Successful exploitation can elevate privileges locally, which can change what the attacker is allowed to read, modify, or disrupt. CVSS is telling us, harder path, serious result. The reason this CVE gets urgency beyond its numerical score is CISA KEV status. CISA's Known Exploited Vulnerabilities catalog is a strong defensive signal because it means the vulnerability is associated with exploitation in the real world, not just theoretical risk. For an elevation of privilege bug, that matters a lot. Many incidents start with limited access, a phished user, a misused credential, or some other initial foothold. A local privilege escalation vulnerability can help turn that limited position into a more powerful one. That can make containment harder, increase the sensitivity of data at risk, and give an attacker more options for persistence or tampering. KEV status means this belongs in the Act Now queue, not the Someday queue. Conceptually, the path starts after an attacker already has local authorized access. The CVSS vector says privileges required are low, and user interaction is not required. So the concern is a low-privileged account or process on the affected system attempting to move to a higher privilege level without needing a victim to click through an additional prompt. Do not interpret this as a standalone internet-facing remote compromise based on the data we have. The attack vector is local. But in enterprise environments, local access is not rare once an intrusion has begun. Workstations, legacy servers, shared administrative environments, and systems with broad user access can all become places where a local elevation bug has defensive significance. Start with inventory. The affected product provided here is Microsoft Windows 10 1607. So your first task is to identify where that operating system version still exists in your environment. Do not guess based on naming conventions or old asset lists. Query endpoint management, vulnerability management, configuration management, and any software inventory you trust. Then, compare each system against Microsoft's official advisory for CVE 2026-68820, because the vendor advisory is the source for exact applicability and remediation details. If you find Windows 10 1607 systems that are unmanaged, intermittently connected, or excluded from normal patch rings, treat those as special cases. KEV-listed vulnerabilities often expose gaps in patch process, not just gaps in code. The primary action is to apply the Microsoft-provided remediation for CVE 2026-68820 to affected Windows 10 1607 systems, following the official guidance. Because this is KEV-listed, prioritize it ahead of ordinary high-severity backlog items that do not have exploitation signal. After patching, verify installation through your normal endpoint or vulnerability platform. Do not rely only on change tickets saying the job ran. While patching is underway, reduce unnecessary local access where possible. Review who can sign in to affected systems, remove stale accounts, tighten administrative group membership, and make sure endpoint protections are active. None of that replaces a patch, but it can reduce the number of low-privilege paths an attacker could use before remediation is complete. Detection for local privilege escalation is about behavior, not a single magic indicator. Establish what normal looks like for Windows 10 1607 systems. Which users log on, which services run, which administrative tools appear, and which processes normally create scheduled tasks or services. Then, look for deviations. Useful signals include low-privileged accounts suddenly performing actions that require higher rights, unexpected creation of services or scheduled tasks, unusual parent-child process relationships around administrative utilities, and suspicious changes to local group membership. Also monitor for system instability around the affected class of component, while remembering that crashes alone do not prove exploitation. Correlate endpoint telemetry, authentication logs, and change management data to distinguish maintenance activity from escalation behavior. Bottom line. CVE 2026-68820 is a high-severity use-after-free vulnerability in the Windows Ancillary Function Driver for WinSock on Windows 10 1607. It requires local access and has high attack complexity, but the successful outcome is local privilege elevation, and CISA lists it as known exploited. That combination is why it is today's number 3 priority in our ranked brief. Patch affected systems using Microsoft's guidance, verify the deployment, restrict unnecessary local access, and monitor for privilege changes or suspicious post-foothold behavior. If this format helps your team decide what to patch first, subscribe to the Daily Ranked CVE Brief. The full ranked report is linked in the description.